I recently got into the Pokemon card collecting hobby, and it's been so much fun, but after my most recent video, I had quite a few duplicate cards, and I was hoping to find something to do with them. So one of my friends showed me this really cool video where they took copies of the same card and then turned it into a 3D version. And as someone who loves crafty things, I just had to give it a try. So hopefully by the end of the video, we'll find a way to make cards that both look great and are easy to make. Okay, so for my first attempt, I'm gonna start pretty simple. I've got 3 copies of this Wooloo card, and what I'm thinking is I'm gonna cut out one frame that's just for the frame of the card, one frame that is just going to be the Wooloo itself, and then one frame for the background. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of explaining this, but I think it'll be more clear once I actually start cutting. All right, for this card, I'm just gonna try to cut out the Wooloo. Just cutting through. Ah, it didn't cut all the way through. Change of plans. Okay, so first of all, I'm gonna try to cut out just the frame. That way I get some practice cutting. Damn, this is really the sharpest, most durable blade ever. Can't even cut through paper. Okay, well, first lesson learned, cutting with precision is a lot harder than it might seem at first. So I definitely recommend trying to practice with some straight edges before you move on to doing something more complicated, like cutting out the Pokemon itself. Okay, once you start to get the hang of cutting things out, it's not so bad. But I am glad that I started with Wooloo, who is overall a very easy round shape. Also, it turned out I only needed 2 cards for this, because I was able to use the picture that I cut out for the frame to actually cut out the Wooloo as well. All right, and the last step is assembly, so let's see how it looks when we put all 3 pieces together. Overall, I would say I think this is a solid first attempt at a basic 3D Pokemon card, and it was really easy and fun to do. All right, guys, it is time to level up our efforts. So for version 2, the main thing that I'm gonna focus on is adding more 3D-ness to the card. Because honestly, this one layer Wooloo card just wasn't cutting it. The first thing that I started off with was planning. I had 4 copies of this Emolga card, so I wrote down exactly what parts I wanted to cut out for each one. In the very front, I knew that I wanted the flowers and the frame, and then right behind that, I was thinking it'd be cute to have the Emolga, and then behind the Emolga, obviously you have the flower field and that one background tree that feels closer than the other background trees. And then the background at the very back of the ground. Cutting out the Emolga cards was basically the same strategy that I used for Wooloo, but definitely with an increased difficulty level since Emolga is way more complex. Okay, so these are the 5 layers that I actually ended up with. As you can see, it is not what I originally planned, but hey, that's why I gave the disclaimer at the beginning that I don't actually know what I'm doing. Also, while I was stacking the cards together, I noticed that the white edges where I made the cuts were pretty noticeable. So I took a Sharpie and then colored them in with black to make them less noticeable. And now, once again, it is time to assemble. This is probably the most satisfying part of the whole process. Oh, this Emolga is so freaking cute. I'm obsessed. But still, I just know that we haven't gotten to the final form yet. For my last evolution, I'm going to be working with this Ralts card. The artwork is just so beautiful, and also Ralts is one of my favorite Pokemon. I was so jealous of Wally that I spent 20 minutes in that one patch of grass trying to catch a Ralts for myself. And then once I did, I benched my starter and pretended that that was my starter. Anyhow, there are 2 tiny improvements that I want to make over the Emolga card. So the first is that when you look at it from the side, it looks a little bit jank just because I basically used foam spacers to make the width of the card. And the other thing is that when you tilt it at certain angles, you can see the Emolga in the layers behind it. So to address the first issue, instead of using the foam tape to add depth between each of the card layers, instead this time I'm going to be using random filler cards. Basically to make these, I just took some cards where I had a bunch of duplicates and then cut out the entire frame. It really doesn't matter what card you use because ultimately these are just going to be used to stack for extra depth and you won't be able to see them behind them anyways. So you can use spare items, you can even use energies. I had a bunch of copies of this Gamma card, so I just decided to use that. Here you can see a side-by-side difference of the Ralts card without any filler cards and the Ralts card with a bunch of filler cards. It really does help add a lot of depth to it. When you stack the extra filler cards in between certain layers, you can choose how much 3D depth you want between each layer. For example, I wanted some extra space between the big mountain in the background and the mountains closer to the foreground, so I added multiple layers of the filler cards. Luckily, since I have so many copies of this Ralts card already, I really didn't need to use that many filler cards for extra depth. And to address the second issue, I actually painted the Raltses in the background black. That way, instead of it looking like Ralts used double team 10 times, it looks more like a shadow or something. Also this time, I used a gel pen when I was coloring the edges to match the color of various things. That way it looks a little bit cleaner than just using a black Sharpie for everything. Alright, and with all of the cutting, painting, and filler carding done, it is now time to assemble. This time, instead of using the foam spacers, I'm gonna be using glue. And for the finishing touches, I put the Ralts in the tree on using some foam. Then I left my card underneath my Elite Trainer box full of other cards to weigh it down overnight so it could dry, and voila! Here's the final product. I'm really happy with how it turned out. In my opinion, it actually looks so good and like super 3D. And I'll admit, this final version is a little bit extra, but in total, it actually only took me like 4 hours to make, which is really not that bad because I think this looks awesome. But I will say, my poor index finger is so tired from cutting with this X-Acto knife. Anyhow, I hope this video gave you some inspiration for a crafty thing to do with some of your duplicate cards. If you liked the video, please subscribe to my channel. It would really mean the world to me. Hope to see you next time. Bye!